Okay, hello YouTube. Today we're going to be going over the two knights defense happening after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6 begins the two knights defense. We're going to be taking a look at the knight attack, starting with the move knight g5, which is of course a double attack on the f7 square. This is going to require black to do something to block that double attack, do something like play pawn to d5, and then we're going to play e captures d5, and now we're going to take a look at the most topical move today, and probably the most solid long-term move that black has to play for the initiative in exchange for a pawn, and that's the move knight to a5. So if you like content like this and you want to see more of it, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button and click on that notification icon. So the most respected move here at this point for white is to play the bishop b5 check line. This is called the Palermo check line, and this is probably white's most reliable way to try to get an advantage. Now, back in Morphy's day, life was a lot easier. There were other moves that you could play as white. You could just play for development, and you could get away with it. You could play pawn to d3. But of course, today we know that pawn to d3 is not really sufficient for an advantage. Actually, going all the way back to the time of Marshall, who really took this move to town. He played pawn to h6 against it, knight f3, pawn to e4, and this is actually a pretty serious difficulty for white to try to get an advantage from here. If you play sort of the normal type of continuation, something like queen e2, you're going to run into knight c4, bc4, bishop c5, and now that knight on f3 has to retreat, and white is forced into a kind of a passive position. And black has a lot of play for the material. You know, black is only down a pawn here. He's got a lot of space. He's got a lot of development. This is the type of the position that was right up Marshall's alley. After knight fd2, game continued. Castle's kingside. We've got knight b3, bishop g4, just aggressive attacking moves. Queen f1, bishop b4 check, c3, bishop e7, and then h3, bishop h5, g4, bishop g6, bishop e3. And then here's a very critical moment. The move b5 is a mistake that allows white to equalize. The move knight d7, super solid move, just keeps up the initiative for black. Black just intends to continue improving his position. Now, when Sala versus Marshall played in Vienna in 1908, yes, it goes all the way back that far, is when this line was basically refuted, and we haven't really improved on it since. It just shows you how good some of these guys actually played back then. You know, Marshall was just a phenomenal player, and this line really holds up today. We haven't really changed our assessment very much on the d3 line since 1908. So we take a look at knight on 1 to d2, knight e5. This is basically the idea. The knight's flying into the d3 square. Castles, and now b5 to open up the position of the white king, open up lines for attacking. So b5, super logical move. It also breaks up the structure of c4 and d5 so we can come in with our queen. So takes, we have knight d3 check, king b1, queen takes d5, king a1, queen b5, and Marshall's got all the open files and all the great pieces that he needs to continue attacking, and he does. So f4, a5, rook d1, f5, and just in general, black has a great position, and it just ended in nothing but pain and suffering for white after the next few moves. Black was able to make his attack finally land, knight b4 check, and Salo resigned, and this was, just decisive advantage black. And nobody's really improved on any of white's opening play. Black just had a major advantage in this position, and there was not a whole lot we could do about it. So if we, go back all the way here and take a look at, okay, so what are our options here? So basically that leaves bishop b5 check. Well, this is kind of a pretty broad area as well. For the most part, nobody really is playing bishop d7. Queen e2 has just been kind of the respected move for, the better part of, several centuries. White has some sort of advantage here after bishop d7, queen e2. So everybody's been playing c6, bc6, and then bc6. And so at this point, we have kind of a major stemming off point. There's basically two schools of thought here. One of them is we retreat our bishop to e2, and then this is going to involve a subsequent knight retreat either to f3 or h3. The other one is that we retreat our bishop to d3. And there are kind of two different ways to retreat your bishop to d3. And the bishop d3 retreat, makes a ton of sense. We don't want black to gain that traditional space that he's gaining in the main line. So, like if you take a look at the main line with bishop e2, h6, and if we just shuffle that knight back to the normal square, knight f3, e4, black has a huge amount of space for the pawn, and generally speaking, black really does have enough play for the pawn in these positions to at least declare equality, if not, in some cases, even slight edge black. After e4, we actually had a game between Kasparov and John Timon that went very well for Kasparov after queen c7, and then d4 takes, knight takes, and then we have bishop d6, b3, castles, bishop b2, h3, and for the most part, this was just kind of considered the typical plan for white to consolidate, to play h3 before you castle, develop the rest of your pieces, and then simply declare that you have an extra pawn here. After these exchanges happened, there's just not much for anybody to write home about, except for white, who's got an extra pawn. And he won very easily against John Timon in Moscow in 1994. So you would think that would be the be-all end of it. Hey, we got the pawn, we kept it, life is good, right? Well, not so fast. As it turns out, black is actually the one that's probably doing a little bit better in these positions. After knight e5, after bishop c5, white doesn't have a great reply here. There's not a whole lot that doesn't lead to either total equality or a questionable position where maybe black is even slightly better. We can try pawn to c3, castles, d4 takes, but this is actually quite a bit different than the Garry Kasparov versus John Timon game. The pawn is on c3, and of course the knight on d3 is not anchored, the knight is loose. And we don't have an easy way to develop the rest of our pieces with white. So all told, after something simple like bishop d6, the pawn extra isn't doing white a whole lot of good. These positions should actually be considered just slight edge black. So for example, castles, rook e8, b4, knight c4, knight c5, we can actually start getting into a little bit of trouble here after something as simple as knight b6, bishop e3. They could sacrifice the exchange and start putting pressure on our position. Black is doing really good here. So like queen d3, a5, knight back, takes, rook e7 with just putting more pressure on our position. We still haven't managed to develop yet. And then, yeah, we could basically just get destroyed here. So black has a ton of initiative for the material here. Easy piece play. So here the best move according to the engine is bishop f7, and this is still supposed to lead to slight edge black, like king f7, queen c4, knight c3, and after queen e7, black has two pieces for the rook and is better. But it's easy enough to blunder into a loss, like after something like queen e7, threatening queen e5 and queen e3, which is relevant because if we play queen b6 to prevent queen takes e3, we have queen e5 should be a winning attack. So if now something like knight d2, we're going to have queen takes e3, rook f2, bishop h2, and I could go a little bit further, but this is decisive advantage black. Black is winning here. So rewinding, basically we don't have a great move, like I said, against bishop c5. Castles kingside is a reasonable alternative, and then after queen d4, which is really the most straightforward and most solid move, you would think that after knight g4, bishop g4, everything would be, absolutely great. And there was actually a game where white did quite well after black played kind of the lemon pawn to e3. But black could just as easily continue with something like knight to c4, knight to c3, castles kingside, bishop e2, rook f e8, bishop takes c4, queen takes c4, d3, ed3, queen d3, cd3, rook ad8, and the most we could hope for is equality with something like bishop f4. This is equality, but black is actually a little bit more active. Black could just take on d3 and just have a completely equal position, and white's position is just sort of laughable. E3 is also possible, and then we have something like this. And in the one game where this was played, white did okay, but I don't think that we can count on this as the be-all, end-all assessment of this position. Especially considering that the computer assessment of this position is still actually advantage black, and clearly white made, clearly black made some further mistakes after this in order to lose the game. Clearly white wasn't doing significantly better just from this position alone. So anyways, we can go ahead and travel kind of to the way back machine. Kind of what are the options available to white if knight f3 isn't all it's cracked up to be. Well, you can play the old Steinitz variation, you can play the move knight h3, or you can focus on kind of these other two moves. You can focus on either bishop d3 or queen f3, which basically have the same idea behind them, which is they kind of want to etch out that e4 square for the knight. Now, the subtle differences between these two moves is that queen f3 does etch out that e4 square for the knight, but it also makes it impossible for the knight to move back to f3 if that is something that white desires to do. So an example here is after queen f3, let's just say, let's give best play, let's say bishop e7. It's now actually possible for white to play both bishop to d3 and bishop e2. Now, among these two moves, the only one that's really been tried by top players is the move bishop to d3, because this is the move that's in fitting with the plan that queen f3 had in mind in the first place. Basically the idea of bringing the knight back to e4. The move bishop e2 has never actually been tried, and it's a move that I'm really leery about. It seems like with best play, black should have some sort of advantage. Like, let's say castle's kingside, queen d3. This is just me kind of riffing a line with Stockfish 14.1, because I don't really have a game to work off of. So queen takes d3, bishop d3, something like knight d5. I would have to move my knight. At least I can move it back to the f3 square. We would have knight b4, knight takes e5, rook d8, knight a3, rook d5, knight back to c4, takes on d3, takes on d3. So the issue here is, even though white's up two whole pawns, so this might initially seem like a tempting idea to play bishop e2 so we can be up two whole pawns, white has absolutely no plan whatsoever to get the rest of his pieces ever developed. This position seems like advantage black. So, for instance, if knight c4, you could play dc4, but rook e5, king d1, bishop c5, major advantage black. White never gets off the ground. Another example would be we could play knight c4, and then we could just simply play bishop f6, castle's kingside, rook takes d3, and again, after something like rook e1, bishop e6, again, white never gets off the ground. White never, ever develops his queenside pieces, and therefore it's hard to assess this position as anything other than slight edge black. Black is only down one pawn. He has a bishop pair, and he's basically up a rook and a minor. So this is slight edge black, and if you look at this on Stockfish 14.1, it also gives the position as slight edge black. So going back, it seems like we need to kind of flow with traditional ideas here. We need to bring this bishop more just immediately back to the d3 square and fall in line with kind of what other people have been doing. But after castles, and then say knight c3, and then h6, and then knight on g to e4, knight d5, knight g3, knight b4, something like knight f5. What we're looking at here is probably the move bishop g5 is the one that black needs to play if he wants to get equality. And now we're looking at pawn to h4, knight d3 check, cd3. And now there was a game between Fedosiev and Koziak that actually went well for white, that continued with the move bishop takes f5, which was apparently enough of a mistake that white could capitalize on. And then here we have queen f5, bishop to h4, b3. White was able to finish his development and got a great game. Queen d4, bishop b2, bishop to g5, castle's queenside, and white actually had a huge attack here and a huge initiative. So he turned the tables, and white went on to win. So this actually turned out really well for white. It looks like the way to go is you actually don't take that knight, which again is a little anti-instinctual, but now it's white that's attacking, so black is the one that needs to play the correct moves. It seems like bishop e7 is the way to go, and this position should just be like basically equal. After pawn to b3, you're going to have bishop takes f5 now, and then queen takes f5, and then pawn to c5, and now bishop b2, and you have a relatively equal position that's, I guess, just kind of unclear. So this is kind of the path that we should be going down in these queen f3 lines. So queen f3, we're going to, with best play, it should be kind of equality or unclear. White's doing okay, so queen f3 is certainly an option. So now the other option is going to be something just like bishop d3 right away. So the advantage behind this option is after something like knight d5, we have the ability to, instead of retreat the knight to the e4 square, which is not ideal right now because black would be able to play f5 and e4 very quickly, we would just retreat the knight to the f3 square. So there was this really critical game played between Wesley So and Magnus Carlsen very, very recently, back in 2021. that continued with bishop d6. We had castles kingside, rook e1, going after the c5 pawn, pawn to f5. White doesn't have much of a choice. We got to snap this pawn, retreat the knight to f3. Then we have pawn to g5, pawn to c4, knight to f4, bishop f1, and then pawn to g4. So far, so forced, basically. So now we have the move that Wesley So played, which was pawn to d4. Well, this actually led to major advantage black, or I mean slight advantage black, which of course with Carlsen is the equivalent of major advantage, because if you give that guy an inch, he's going to turn it into a full point. But Carlsen continued with g takes f3 in this position, and Wesley So continued with queen takes f3, and Carlsen was able to eke out sort of what amounted to a slight edge with black after knight e6, and he went on to win the game. Now what's interesting about this is there was an improvement found on this game not too long after this game. It turns out that really the correct idea is to preface everything going on here with the move pawn to c5. Pawn to c5 is actually a considerable improvement on the actual game. And this was come up with by a very strong Indian player, Paravian, played against Multiev in Russia in 2021. So just, kind of these are back-to-back games. These are really recent developments within this line. So we have c5. So the main idea is you want to kind of displace this bishop. You want to get this bishop to go back to c7. And it's kind of a critical thing. You don't want the queen actually defending that bishop. It sounds weird. But if you go back to the other line, like g5, d4, after gf3, you'd like to be able to play bishop takes f4. But it's absolutely not possible, because after, say, f takes g2, when you play bishop d6, this queen is defending that d6 square. So now they can simply take on g1, take on f1 with check, and then after rook takes f1, queen d6 is just completely winning for black. But if you can get that bishop to move ahead of time, if you can play the move pawn to c5 and get that bishop to move, say, back to c7, the queen is no longer defending that bishop. So now you have the opportunity to play bishop takes f4, and after f takes g2, you can throw in this bishop c4 check, and then after knight takes c4, you can play bishop takes f4, and there's not going to be a queen captures c7, because queens fortunately do not move that way. And white's going to have an advantage. After bishop a6, bishop e5, this would actually just be decisive advantage white. So that's kind of the idea, is you play this c5, and it seems to work. They don't have bishop takes c5, you would have d4, which is a double attack, and then after bishop d6, you would continue with knight e5, which again threatens this piece, and after takes, you would again have a double attack, and then you would again have a double attack, so you'd actually be winning material. So in that game, the game actually continued with bishop c7, d4 takes, bishop takes, and then we have bishop takes f4, queen f3, and white actually enjoyed a slight advantage. Queen takes d4, knight a3, bishop g5, rook a d1, and the rest of his moves were all pretty natural, and life went pretty good. He got his pieces to good squares, he got an advantage, and he kind of proved his position just really cleanly. He managed to get the extra material, he got the extra stuff, he shoved that extra pawn, that really dangerous extra pawn down black's throat, and was able to prove the position so cleanly that it almost just made it look like that was just supposed to be the result. White's just always supposed to win these positions. Like, why not? So anyways, that's kind of the current consensus. If we go back here, this is kind of the current consensus of the theory is, really bishop d3 is kind of taking over as the main attempt to try to play for an advantage here with white. The only other real try that you can try is bishop e2, h6, and you can try the Steinitz variation. And to be totally honest, the Steinitz variation by itself is probably going to have to involve its own video. There's so many different ways that black can try to play for equality from here. It's an enormous amount of theory to try to compact into just one video. So anyways, I hope that you found this video helpful. I hope you learned something new about chess, and I hope you can use some of these ideas in your own games. Thank you very much for watching.